I'm going to go ahead and get started just because the content of what we have is so good today, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. Quite often our webinars are USAID staff and kind of internal learning, but because this was really new results and some really cutting edge work in the digital space, I wanted to be sure to invite this up to other people who I thought would be interested in learning about it. So thanks very much for joining us this morning. If we could have the next slide, please. So I just wanted to remind people that our learning group really focuses on our theory of change for combating wildlife trafficking. We've been at this for a little bit over 2 years now, really focusing on 3 key strategies for combating wildlife trafficking. And this is just a high-level summary of our theory of change. But this morning, we're really focused on the first strategy to reduce consumer demand through behavior change methodologies, again, with the purpose of reducing wildlife crime and really improving wildlife conservation around the world. As we go to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight what our learning agenda questions are around demand reduction for behavior change. Our overall question of what we're looking at is, what does effective demand reduction look like? And we have kind of 3 areas of interest in that. And the first is about, what does it look like when you reduce the supply of illegal wildlife products? Also, we're trying to learn more about what the appropriate metrics and methodologies for monitoring demand reductions are, especially when you get into that behavior change space and trying to measure. So if we actually change attitudes, will people change their behavior? Because we all know how challenging that is. And then also we're interested in looking at different messaging strategies, especially the role of positive messaging and messaging with links to law enforcement. And I think what is so unique about our webinar this morning is that we're actually going to focus and hear about the implementation of an activity that's going to touch on all 3 of those questions. We don't get that every day. So thanks in advance for sharing what you guys are learning with us. If we have the next slide, please. I just wanted to give a quick introduction of who's with us today. First, we have Nora de Guzman, who is the team lead for demand reduction and behavior change at USAID Wildlife Asia, based in Bangkok, representing FHI 360. She has decades of experience leading very large USAID-funded social and behavior change communication and capacity building projects in the health sector, and we are really lucky to have her with us in the CWT space today. So thanks again, Nora, for all of your hard work in leading this effort for Wildlife Asia. We also have Sunny Patel from Trends Digital, who is originally from Montreal, Canada, and has a background both in business and the finance sector, and is a chartered financial analyst who has studied artificial intelligence and machine learning for business and strategy. And we're really lucky to have him applying all of his knowledge on wildlife trafficking as well. And then also we will hear from David Garcia Cumplido, also with Trends Digital, where he is the Director of Marketing and Technology and Creative Strategy for online marketing and communications. He's worked with a variety of industries to apply these skills in strategy and technology to generate cost-effective and measurable results, which we're also going to hear about today. So thank you for joining us, and please let me turn it over to Nora to get us started.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Megan, for that introduction. And thank you also for giving us the opportunity to share our campaign on digital deterrence in Thailand with you, the learning group, as well as with other stakeholders. First of all, I would like to introduce our project, which is USAID Wildlife Asia. USAID Wildlife Asia is a 5-year project that was launched in 2016. As you know, it is funded by USAID, Regional Development Mission for Asia, or RDMA. And its goal is to help end transnational wildlife crime in Southeast Asia and China, focusing on 4 species: elephant, pangolin, rhino, and tiger. And to achieve this goal, the project has 4 objectives. The first is to reduce consumer demand in China, Thailand, and Vietnam, the 3 largest markets for wildlife parts and products in the region, through the use of social and behavior change communication, or SBCC, as an approach to change behavior and not just raise awareness. The second is to strengthen regional law enforcement capacity and coordination. The third is to increase commitment to addressing illegal wildlife trafficking through legislation and environmental jurisprudence. And the fourth is to improve regional actions to reduce wildlife crime in ASEAN and China. The project is managed by a consortium led by RTI International as prime contractor, working with 5 subcontractors: FHI 360, which is responsible for SBCC demand reduction; International Fund for Animal Welfare implementing agency in China; Freeland supports law enforcement and policy; Traffic is implementing partner and focal point also for demand reduction in Vietnam; and Conservation Council of Nations supporting policy. And the project is based in Bangkok. Next slide, please. So what is the digital deterrence campaign in Thailand? We implemented the digital deterrence campaign to address the trend for online purchase of wildlife products based on findings from USAID Wildlife Asia's consumer research in early 2018. Our findings from this research also corroborated those from other studies, for example, studies by Traffic. We launched this pilot innovation using digital marketing to deter online buyers from pursuing their purchase. We use Google as the main platform, since this is very popular in Thailand and of course open source. And we developed ads aimed at creating a hostile, uncomfortable, risky online trading environment among potential buyers who generally go online with a feeling of anonymity and comfort. So we aim to disrupt this feeling of security. Next slide, please. We partnered with Thai government agency, Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, or DNP. We used 4 languages: Thai, English, Chinese, and Vietnamese. So why Chinese and Vietnamese? We aimed these languages at travelers to Thailand from China and Vietnam. Based on results from our research as well as other studies, there is a significant proportion of Chinese and Vietnamese travelers who acquire wildlife products outside their countries, which include Thailand. We used 4 message concepts, which I will discuss later, and monitored results and trackers through digital analytics. The campaign was online for 7 months, from August 2018 to March 2019. Next slide, please. How does the campaign work? Well, when someone does a Google search using one of a list of selected sensitive keywords that actually denote potential interest in buying illegal wildlife, which we obtained from wildlife organizations doing online monitoring of trade like Freeland and Traffic, one of 4 alternative ads will appear. If the person clicks on the link accompanying the ad, the person will be directed to a landing page sponsored by the DNP. So you'll see on top left. Landing page contains a warning message that the content being searched may be prohibited, and Thai authorities are monitoring illegal wildlife trade online. Next slide, please. Next. Here you will see the landing page. Note the look of the visual. The color is black. 2 circles symbolize a set of eyes looking at you. And the message warning is in red on top. This is in line with creating a hostile environment online and increasing the perception of personal risk in the potential buyer and disrupting this feeling of comfort and security while they are online. Next slide, please. So following the SBCC approach of knowing your target audience, developing messaging based on drivers and behaviors, we designed the ads based on evidence from our 2018 Thailand consumer research, which revealed key drivers and concerns regarding use of elephant and tiger products. For both ivory and tiger, the major perceived benefits or drivers, in red, you will see, are beliefs that these two products bring good luck and or protect one from evil or harm. Now you will see the concerns at the bottom in green are possible deterrents to purchase. We see that concerns about legality are very significant for both ivory and tiger. We thus developed the ads around these drivers and concerns. Next slide, please. So we developed 4 message concepts in 4 languages covering elephant, tiger, pangolin, and rhino. Pangolin and rhino ads were mainly targeted at travelers from China and Vietnam, because in Thailand, our consumer research showed no significant local consumption of these 2 product types. Again, we mainly use Google, a very popular search engine in Thailand. Next slide, please. So the first concept is searching for you. You see it all there are corresponding ads for all 4 species: ivory, tiger, pangolin, and rhino. As you will see, searching for ivory, illegal ivory, searching for tiger products, searching for pangolin, searching for rhino products, searching for rhino products, then we're searching for you. The ads all end with trade is illegal, undercover officers are online, and the link to the landing page always accompanies the ads. Next slide, please. The next message concept is searching for bad luck. The headline, as you see, refers to amulets, that buying amulets bring bad luck or bad karma. The ads cover amulets made of tiger, ivory, and other elephant parts. Again, based on evidence from our Thailand research that ivory and tiger amulets are desired for religious or spiritual reasons. And of course, rhino and pangolin are generally not used as amulets. The link is shown again, and the ads end by saying that amulets are illegal and undercover officers are online. Next slide, please. The third message concept is, can you afford the fines? The ads cover ivory, elephant, and tiger amulets. Again, the link is shown and the ads end by saying these amulets are illegal and undercover officers are online. Next slide, please. Oops. Sorry. The fourth message concept is official alert. This was intended to be the strongest in terms of deterrence effect. The ad is a warning from Thai authorities that the search has triggered an official alert. These are the 4 message concepts with corresponding Google ads. And I will now turn over the floor to my colleagues from our media agency, Trends Digital, to present the results of our campaign.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Nora, for that. My name is Sunny, and next to me is Mr. David. Hi, everyone. Hi there. So, just on the results, we'll just kick off by saying the first thing is that we obviously use Google search. Here in Thailand, it is by far the largest share of search. I think someone needs to put on mute. Okay, yeah, thank you for that. We'll get okay, so I'll continue on. I feel like someone's getting a drink. That's fine. The geolocation was limited to Thailand, with, as mentioned before, English, Thai, Chinese, and Vietnamese languages. We tracked just under about 600,000 keyword searches during that period of time, down from August till mid-March, or roughly about 220 days. Thai was by far the predominant language, followed by English. That was about 10%. Then we had about 1% was China and Chinese and Vietnamese. The other thing is we'd like to say that when we've executed this on multiple pages, and as we had learning throughout the weeks and months, we adjusted ourselves to that and adjusted the media plan according to what we were seeing. Some words being caught in there, some words being removed. So this was a bit of an active process that was going under continual review. And also, this was predominantly mobile based in the sense that this is where demand was, this is where the searches were coming from the consumer side. And just maybe taking a step back for a second here, this overall approach for us when we first was discussing this with Nora and teams, we were quite surprised by this idea, because essentially we had to reframe how Google was being used in general. It's essentially, as you know, all been structured to set up to encourage searching and just encourage the matching of the searching with locations and where people want to go, to essentially encourage. So to use Google search ads in the opposite way required us to really rethink and reframe everything from top to bottom. And these are some of the results. Next slide, please. So of the total of about 596,000 keyword searches, we had 94% of the total search share. Now, what does that mean? That means that we were looking to get about 80% plus. So we were quite happy with the 94%. That means there was probably 100 people search for these keywords. Our ads would show up, and as you can see, quite predominantly top in 94 of those 100. And the rest was typically because of budget constraints, or where we were capping it, or just to make sure that we had some limitations in place, that the budgets would not go wild. But actually, we were able to really dominate search in these keywords. And also a very important point that we were trying from the beginning was to stay at least to 1 to 1.5 within the search, and that's an average search position, meaning that if the searches go around 1, 2, 3, averaging it all out, we were hitting 1 to 1.1 across the whole campaign. So not only were we fairly dominating the search area, but also remaining in the top position. And as you can see from that ad, it's quite a impactful placement. Next slide, please.
To maybe summarize that in one point, is for the period of 220 days that we were running, we were the #1 message for every person doing searches on these topics.
Yeah, absolutely correct, David. Yeah, thank you for that. Just in terms of costing, when we initially had budgeted how much this would be running in terms of budget on daily spend and whatnot, we had used various benchmarks, and we had used our typical, we normally deal with B2C clients, and this came in much lower than expected. But there was also some other interesting results, is that what that led to is that it led to a lot more increase in our impression rate. So while you get charged by Google for clicking, this way, since people were not really wanting to click on certain messages at all, our ads appeared much more often. So hence we were able to conserve a lot more of the budget. And also, just in case anyone's wondering, we did go through the T's and C's several times to make sure that we were following all the regulations and also the privacy regulations, which we did. So within this construct, we were able to essentially maximize with the budgets allocated. Next slide, please. For some of the deeper results, I'm going to have David make some comments on these.
Yeah, I'll delve with you guys a bit more into a few of the demographic details that we found. Some of the results that we identified at this stage are more indicative and leading more towards next actions. Meanwhile, some others are either respecting some of the results that you've gotten before and kind of like validating them. Meanwhile, some are maybe some small hints at some demographic idiosyncrasies that we can look into deeper. And starting off with just the basics, which is the searches by language. Because of our geolocation towards Thailand, Thai obviously dominated the market. One thing that we can highlight here is that we didn't expect that English would take such a big part, which can potentially indicate that we did have quite a good amount of tourists and walkthroughs and people using English languages to commit these searches. And meanwhile, Vietnamese and Chinese were very, very small. And because of that, we kind of focused our efforts on English and Thai, and these were Vietnamese was turned off on the 5th of February, meanwhile Chinese was turned off a few days after. Regarding the species, we were, again, identifying the same trend that you guys have been identifying, which is that ivory got the highest interest overall. We identified as well that rhino was quite high, together with tiger, followed by the least amount of searches being performed for pangolin. On to the next slide, please. Regarding distributions and further demographics such as age, the biggest percentile, about 40%, was made up of 25 to 44-year-olds. And we also identified that male searchers are a bit more active than female searchers by roughly about 10%. We have a few unknowns here, which are due to the platform and the TNCs and privacy policies from Google themselves. So we are not able to cover details on those. Next slide, please. One area that is of potentially much larger interest, specifically when it comes to narrowing down activity areas and maybe potential things for law enforcement, are the areas where these searches were performed the most. From our top 15 cities that we've listed below, we've highlighted top 5. Bangkok leads this, obviously due to just population size alone and the transit, followed by Chiang Mai, which is bordering to Myanmar and Laos, followed then by Pattaya, which is a famous tourist city in the south and a seaport as well. Then Hat Yai, which is a bit further down south, past Pattaya, and it borders on Malaysia. And Khon Kaen serves as a central eastern mainland city close to Vietnam borders. Next slide, please. Digging a bit deeper into the income classes, we found an interesting dichotomy between the English and Thai searchers. Thai searchers, the highest percentile was the 50% lower income bracket of searches, and quite clearly dominating all the other searchers. The lower 50% income bracket in Thailand is 200,000 Thai baht or lower, which equals roughly $6,000 US, and or lower than that. Meanwhile, in English, we identified that the top 10% income bracket is actually the one that dominates. But the difference between the top 10% and the lower 15% for the English searches is not as big, and it amounts to roughly 20% margin.
Yeah, we just want to do that if you can see that the lower 50% income bracket in Thailand really did stand out. Yeah. In terms of it, and the implications of this is something we can discuss, but I mean, it really was a standout.
On to the next slide, please.
I would like to just interject here and ask whoever is typing to please mute yourself. Thank you.
We do appreciate the interest. So, but yeah, then digging a bit deeper into some of the crunch that we did on the search terms, I just would like to remind everybody, we did our best to cover all the searches, but when you hit like 500,000 kind of terms, things start to get a bit fuzzy, but we did our best into categorizing this and highlighting some of the search terms that were used by users. These are not the categories that we targeted for. On the right side, those are actual search terms that users were using to get to whatever they were trying to get to. Now, we're starting off with English, even though Thai was the biggest one, out of the reason that we can present to you English the best. In Thai, we're going to highlight some of the key differences. But onto English, we found that the broad searches around ivory are the biggest percentile. These broad searches are roughly around like what is ivory used for, the ivory types, and or like what color is ivory, things along those lines. Meanwhile, as we go deeper, we found that things get much more specific. And then we found that about 20% of people are looking for specific accessory items and or fashion items, together with the species that we were covering. Along those lines of tiger tooth fangs and or tiger tooth necklaces, ivory necklaces. These we usually in e-commerce, we do find to be intentful of purchase and acquisition, but we can't tell for sure at this stage. Next, followed by animal parts, which was roughly a bit larger than 5%, but not as big as the accessory and items, where people were actually searching for animal parts like rhino horns and or tiger fangs. One thing that stood out for us, which we did not expect at this size, was searches for purchase of the whole animal itself. So asking tiger for sales and or real baby tigers and are looking for elephants or rhino. So that was something that we definitely did not anticipate. And lastly, the latest segment that is quite indicative as well of purchase intent is again the requests and or inquisitive questions and queries around product details, fake authenticity questions, the kind of consistency and texture of ivory, the prices of products, all those things, even to the detail of where to acquire things. Next slide, please. Onto Thai, it's quite similar at a top level from the categories with one big difference. That is that a lot of the queries made along animal parts and around accessories are followed immediately by religious inquiries. And they cover everything from belief to luck-related search terms, including the product itself, also covering areas of belief of different types of benefits, being for luck, for power, for fortune, for being lucky in money and finances, and it always is paired with one of the products. There's another area that we also identified was that a lot of people ask questions around services related to authenticity, rarity, and patterns to identify, well, what kind of products can I get out there and what should I be looking out for to get the most out of my buck, in essence. Next slide, please. I'll just cover this one very, very briefly. It's just a technical quick check before we move on to the next slide, which is actually what this leads up to, is that from all the searches that we got, around 3% clicked through to our site. Of those 3%, which are 17,000 sessions, we identified 13,000, roughly 14,000, to be unique sessions. From that, we can anticipate that very few people were coming back, which suggests a strong deterrence effect. And those will lead also to some degree that we'll cover in the end into our next steps from this campaign. Next slide, please. I'll remind you the number of users that clicked to our site, unique users. Those were 13,800. Of those users that were on our site, we had obviously the hero banner that you already saw before, which is in the top part. But as you follow through the flow of the website, you'll see that we have additional sections here. And these sections were aimed at providing users additional actions that would allow them to somewhat gain more information as to why what they're doing may potentially be wrong, and for us to gain additional insights. And of all those unique sessions, we identified a total of 523 positive actions taken. Those are broken down into about almost 400 clicks towards the DNP side to understand more about the illegality of these items and which items are certified and or illegal, followed by 120 actions of reaching out to the DNP page to inform us of illicit actions, followed by lastly 20 calls to hotline, which were also led to the DNP page.
And those are actually people pushing the button to call to the hotline.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And we can wrap up and move to the next slide. Thank you. So just taking a quick step back, of all the searches that we identified, at this stage, over the period of time that we were running, we can't really hint at seasonality. The few dips that you're seeing here are pauses and ads and for optimization and change to search terms and the biddings. And the last that you see in March is because we turned things off.
Mid-March, yeah.
Yeah, March 15 was the turn-off date. So those were the dips. And also for slight dips that we usually see in January, it's a market thing. It's after New Year, we usually see slight dips across all the accounts. Yeah. All right, I'll hand it over to additional learnings for Sunny now.
Sure. Next slide, please. Thank you, David. Yeah, I'll just to go through some of these points here. Some we've already covered in terms of the languages. I would like to reiterate that when we were looking at some of the search terms, especially in Thai, we were quite surprised at the depth of the search that they were asking for. In the term, an example would be like how to check the authenticity that a tiger tooth or paw would be real, or looking for whole elephants or whole tigers, or also terms for the grade level of these animal parts that surprise us, since we didn't have terminology of that in English that we could relate to. So that quite stood out. The searching for you an official alert, had the lowest click-through rate. And we don't want to speculate too much on that. However, it could be indicative that it would, it's something that would cause people to stand back and not want to proceed further. There was another one in terms of these kind of positive unintended consequences during this journey. While we were doing this and bidding for words, we realized there were certain shops and stores bidding for words, and also an organic search, just many shops on different platforms, websites, Facebook shops, things of that nature. We collated this information, passed it off to our partners, and in at least one instance that we know, and potentially several others, they were able to actually go and find and track these people and shut down these illegal operations where these distributions were happening. So for us who work in the digital world, it was good to see that also transpiring on the offline world. And then also for us, from our perspective, everything that we've done so far working with Nora and the teams is very scalable, meaning that we have all these trackers and things following all the privacy rules and regulations, of course, but we have this in order for us to scale this into other options moving forward. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps.
Yeah. So taking off from Sunny, who already mentioned that we now have a scalable campaign model, right? This scalable campaign model can work in both ways. We can scale this horizontally and vertically as well. Vertically in a sense where we see these search terms and we have so many records on hand now that we can go further in depth. But when we look at the horizontal nature, is that because search is demand response only, we have now a campaign model that we can expand with additional messaging and outside of search as well. So the current discussions that we're having, I just want to disclaim this, that some of these things are still to be fully finalized, but we're looking to expand the messaging out of search, move into social and websites. Websites being potential banner ads that run where people are doing their own searches and browsing and content consumption. Obviously, this would be targeted and follow the users outside of their illicit search. We would develop the ads based off of the approved concepts and working concepts that we found in our optimization phases. And we would then aim to generate additional learnings across this, further building on the search, but then also expanding and adapting our strategies towards social and digital. The current model is comprised of somewhat of a two-way strategy. Is one, we would be looking to have a chat with the users that search for us. So we would retarget them and we would place deterrence messaging. And the second component would be a positive take action message aimed at people related, close to those audiences. And then with that take action message, moving them to share and exert peer pressure on these users that are performing the illicit searches themselves. What we can add to that, because of the scalability and the cost efficiency of this, digital in essence, is that we can also run concurrent online surveys for M&E. And we can place these in different areas and sections of our campaign and then generate results and compare and have control groups in place. And with that, we're kind of done on our end. We could then move into the Q&A component.
Oh, David, you're not done yet. There's lots of questions coming in. Lots of questions coming in for all of you guys, and I can't wait to get really dig in. And I'm sorry for that disturbance of the mute and unmute. That's totally the challenge of webinar communications. I've had a lot of questions coming in around kind of the adaptive management focus, and so I wanted to ask all three of you to really kind of one big question that you can unpack in whatever way you want to unpack, because we are all about adaptive management and kind of learning from what you're doing and iterating. And so I guess I'd like to ask all three of you kind of what about that change and turning off the Vietnamese and Chinese ads? Is that do you think there was a difference between the tourists and the local people? Was there a difference between buying in the markets versus searching online? And then also just kind of what have you learned, big picture? And for Sunny and David too, what have you learned about this campaign? I think that difference of everything that you normally do for digital metrics, this was the complete opposite. So what have you learned from that? And maybe start with Nora and then Sunny and David.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Megan. So based on what we have learned, you're focusing on about the Chinese and Vietnamese ads. As you know, the mobile platform, as was presented by David, was mainly used. So we assume that when Chinese tourists, for example, come to Thailand, they don't really use Google. I mean, they use like WeChat, etc. So they may not have access. They don't actually have access to Google or to any of the platform, the app that we're using. So maybe that would be it. And then Vietnamese as well. They're actually, I think, online or some other mobile application. So that may be one of them. In fact, somebody from Vietnam approached me last March during the DEFRA workshop and said, would it be possible to replicate the campaign here in Vietnam? So it probably is possible. In China, it's open source. I know that the IFOC is already doing some campaign when they flash ads. I mean, using the Tencent and Baidu. But I don't know whether they have actually analyzed the data that they have found, because of course that is not an open source. So that is what I have learned. We can actually replicate this in Vietnam and other countries. And then the second thing I learned was that I was quite surprised with the number of searches. I mean, 500,000 in 7 months is quite big. But of course, if we look at the keywords, 50% were probably only educational, looking for or researching, and there was 20% and 5% really that you would see that probably are interested in buying. But this really reflects our research, our formative research, which found that in terms of total population, 2% actually own ivory and 1% own tiger. This is in Thailand, but they are a very significant proportion of the population. And even with the age group of 25 to 44, we found that in our research, this is the dominant age group that are buying. They're buying the illegal wildlife products. So there's a lot of corroboration between the data that we have found online through this digital deterrence campaign and the data that we have found also in our formative research last year. So those are the key learnings. So I think we can learn more because this is just the beginning. In terms of actual change in behavior, we really cannot detect. As David says, it suggests, it implies deterrence, but we really don't know whether we have actually deterred, because some of those hardcore buyers may actually have just gone to the dark web or gone to a physical location. That we don't know. We can only know through possibly through M&E. So for the second phase, we're also applying or including an M&E component. So thank you.
So Jan Verdefe from WWF just noted that WWF is doing geolocated ads on Chinese social media to reach Chinese travelers to Thailand and Vietnam who are interested in buying ivory. And she just wondered if, and maybe Sunny and David, you could comment on this in your kind of remarks on what you learned. How would this be transferable to other search engines?
Sure. Yeah. I'll tackle the language thing. Initially, since we did geo target Thailand, these would be people searching in that specific language within Thailand. So this would probably likely be in the border area or for Vietnam in this case, and or tourists. And also, what we realized is that a lot of them, as you mentioned, we're not using Google as a search engine. So that's probably one of the major reasons. But however, even if it's just 1,000 or 2,000 searches, it is still 1,000 to 2,000 searches. So that's one comment on the language side. In terms of learnings, there were quite a lot during the experience. It was quite, one is that we had to do a hard reset on how we think about how we market, really, because like I said, it was really the almost exact opposite KPIs that we would normally get, and the exact opposite of a brief that we would normally get. So it was actually quite fascinating. So in a way that, we've never done this before, never thought about doing this before, I guess we can do it kind of attitude that the team had. So, that was one part. Another thing was that we were made quite aware that online is quite a scary place when you go, depending how deep you go. It's not really the 50, 60%. It's when you start going down to the bottom, 30, 20, 10%, when people are really searching for things that kind of give you chills, was another learning. Another one is that this could potentially be a new revenue stream, I think, for some large publishers, if tackled the right way. I mean, if looking for shoes and getting them straight in your face here, click here and buy shoes, and when you search for illegal stuff, it kind of disappears or doesn't appear at all and nothing happens. If there are organizations interested to deter people from this, and it's done in a way that is beneficial for society, I think this is a discussion that we should all be having. And then finally, I think that for us as a team, it really made us think about how could we scale this, or like how could we work with other partners. So when you're talking about WWF in China, this is something interesting for us because we have a lot of knowledge that we feel that we can share, and we're really interested to learn what they had learned in their markets to see, if we can, cross-correlate some of these things together.
Yeah, that would be great. And Crawford Allen from Traffic is on the line and already posted his comment about the work they do with an alliance, the Coalition to End Wildlife Trafficking Online, and how he thought that this might be really inspirational to that coalition. I do want to give David your chance to talk about what you've learned in this campaign, and then maybe come back to that cost element, because I think the return on investment is an interesting point to talk on this as well. But David, please go first.
Yeah, so I don't have too much to say, and I can maybe dip real quick into how this can be translated to other markets, right? Maybe covering then the Chinese social media and search. So this is the first time that we've ever done something like this, right? And our philosophy is really that we continuously optimize on things. So we've been building the business of work that has been quite akin and similar to each other. This was the first time where we were working on a project and we had no KPIs we could hit. we had no until you invited us to the webinar, we didn't know we were doing a good job. So thanks for that. Now that we know that we are getting some good learnings, we're hitting some numbers, we know what information we're looking for. The remaining areas, like where do we place this? Can this be done in China? Can this be done in Vietnam? The campaign model, the tactic is still workable. The same is more of a technical question, a platform question. How can this be implemented, and or what are the disclaimers that we need to attach, because maybe it plays out a bit differently in the Chinese search, a bit differently on Vietnamese social media. So that would be that. On the ROI, so cost-wise, I just wanted to clarify, we did not get any support from Google on this.
So we did reach out to give a heads up that we're going to do this before they close all our accounts, just in case. And there was no tacit approval. They didn't shut us down. So, but on a cost perspective, yeah, it was really low because, the message got out there, but they charge per click. So yeah.
No, thanks for that. I definitely wanted to touch a little bit on the law enforcement angle of your campaigns, and maybe Nora, you could comment a little bit about what you think about the messages at work and the changes that you made in your messaging, and then also just kind of what is the relationship with law enforcement. And I mean, we don't ever want people to think that these are just kind of empty threats, that there isn't any kind of follow-up, but just what do you think about that whole messaging angle of law enforcement messages, Nora?
Well, I think for this, I think the law enforcement messaging worked for this, because you can see that, for example, in Thailand, there were a lot of, searches that with purchase intent that seem to be driven by very strongly held beliefs, like spiritual beliefs, etc., which are basically sometimes very difficult with more positive messaging. So the question of legality, I think, which was a concern that we actually uncovered from our formative research, was quite good. In fact, just as an anecdote, one of our partners who came to a meeting, who did not know about the campaign, said that she was looking for ivory, and all of a sudden this black thing came, and she got really afraid what it was, and she immediately left the site. So I think that law enforcement angle and the threat, the disrupting your sense of security angle worked for this campaign. But of course, we would have to think again about the second phase. Because, for example, the second phase will move again towards the social circle, like-minded groups, which could exert pressure. So another type of messaging may be called for these types of target audiences. And then I know for this first phase, we did not really coordinate with law enforcement because, of course, we cannot knock on the doors of people and tell them that you're violating the law. So as you said, these were like threats, in a way, idle threats, but we wanted it to be taken seriously. And definitely for the second phase, we would need to coordinate with law enforcement to see what can be done. But I'm happy to note but there were some, how do I call it, unintended effects on you know, supply chains. For example, there was, as Sunny mentioned, there was a seller that was shut down, or at least apprehended because of this. So I think eventually we really definitely have to work and coordinate with law enforcement.
Just
Thanks.
like to say on that.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
very quickly. I just want to just touch upon that on the last thing that Nora mentioned, that on the person that they or people that they shut down. You know, this was done by us just doing some regular searches and seeing these things pop up organically. You know, and some of them, you know, so there were some that were bidding against us, but a lot of this stuff was just there. It was already there. We just took the next step to reach out to our partners and say, hey, this is not right. Can someone do something about it? And they did.
Yeah, Gail Burgess from Traffic also made a comment in our chat box about how it would be nice to also test some of the visuals, because I think those eyes peering in at you, just to understand that visual effect of did that really have a deterrent effect and make people click off the page really quickly, and also just keep testing those messages, particularly with the law enforcement. And certainly, I would love to hear, we have a couple law enforcement officers on the webinar now, both Anne-Marie and Stephanie from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I would love to hear your ideas on how to share this with Thai government officials and law enforcement there, just to share kind of also just the amount of searching, because I think that was really kind of shocking, as Nora said, just the number of searches in this 7-month time period of what people were looking for. And obviously there are something like Ivory, there could be a lot of confounding factors of people searching for positive reasons and not just negative. But still, it's an awful lot of searching for really rare animals that we're trying to conserve. If there are any other questions in the chat box, please put your questions in. We've got a couple more minutes before we go to the closing. I know we talked a little bit about what you've learned so far and some of the messaging strategies. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say about that, Nora? Kind of what your plans are going forward?
We're discussing with Sunny and David and finalizing the second phase of this campaign. So we have found, for example, as far as messaging is concerned, also based on the concept test that we have been doing for our spiritual beliefs campaign, and we tested 2 concepts. You know, you had a question on positive messaging versus more negative type, quote unquote, messaging. And we had one more positive message, which was like, you know, you don't have to have amulets, because by yourself you can be successful, you can have good fortune. And another more negative messaging, focusing on, you know, taking a life for a life. And we found that the more negative messaging worked. So I would say, if it is actually very strongly held beliefs that are very close to the heart of people, then probably in the Asian context, the more positive messaging may not work. But if it is like Ivory as beauty, which is outsider, it's not really close to the heart or close to the spiritual or religious realm, then the more positive messaging will work. So, but these will be tested. So I think we're also learning a lot about messaging from this campaign and the other campaigns. So yeah, I think that's all.
Great. I think I'm going to leave it there, because hopefully that was kind of a positive message. If we could go to the next slide quickly. I did just want to point out the websites for our Combating Wildlife Trafficking Learning Group site, and also the questions on our learning agenda. This is where we post the knowledge products we did. We have a very nice write-up on different strategies for building capacity of law enforcement officers. Also, our case study competition compilation is found on this site, as well as all the recordings and other documents. This is where you go, and this is where we will also post the recording of this webinar. Upcoming events, we have June 6th, we'll be hearing from USAID Mozambique and their work to strengthen the judiciary in Mozambique and their memorandum of agreement with the Ministry of Justice there. Really looking forward to that webinar. And also just scheduled June 13th, we'll be diving deeper into adaptive management processes in wildlife trafficking and the partnership between USAID and DFID and the Global Learning for Adaptive Management Initiative. So please look forward to that one. And also on the last slide, please. And just to share our contact information for Nora and the Wildlife Asia folks, this is where you can go to reach Nora, and then also my email address and that of Caroline Cook. This is actually the first webinar that we've done with our second version of Measuring Impact, so I'd like to thank the team at Measuring Impact for their work on this webinar, and also just really my heartfelt thanks to Nora, Sunny, and David for sharing the results of this innovation. Please, I hope you all can follow up with them. We've had great interaction with our guests today and ideas from Gail and Jan and Crawford about how we can all work together to fight online and in-person wildlife trafficking. So thanks again, everybody.